Welcome back to room 5, and we have our final discussion panel here. It is a dangerous time for democracy on why we need to take social media and generative AI seriously. We invite 3 speakers here. They are Erliani Abudu Rahman. She is a PhD student from Harvard Shenxi Chen School of Public Health, and Stephen Ray, who is an independent researcher in the United States, and Sarah Di Bartolomeo, who is a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Constance. Let's welcome them.
Thank you. And thank you so much for being here today. My colleague, Julia Campioli, can't make it because she's in Brazil with very poor connectivity. She tried this morning. So just without further ado, let's go and check to the next slide. So today's this agenda. So it's a few things, but I'm going to make it very interactive. So I'll try and make it quite short, and then we can make it more interactive if I have more questions. And do feel free to stop me because I do speak quite fast, and also like just to ask questions because it can get quite, I think, a bit complicated. Next slide, please. So just to begin a background about why we're doing this work. So when Elon Musk bought the platform Twitter back in October 2022, I was one of the founding members of Twitter's Trust and Safety Council. So I was there from its very beginning in 2016. And the first rep as female from Asia. So when it's going on about having a council, blah, 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 we've been in existence for at least 6 years. Anyway, after a month, the rise of insults and slurs against Black people went up by 202%. So not 22, but 202% within a month after his purchase. A rise of insults and slurs against Jews went up by 61% within 2 weeks. And against gay people within a month, it went up by 58%. And so I couldn't, in full conscience, remain on the council. And that's why I decided to instigate and get everyone else on the council to resign with me. At the time, there were 100 of us. So we were basically selected based on our subject matter expertise and also in terms of diversity, like geography. And so then we could give content moderation advice on the ground as things evolve. And so then I resigned on December 8th, 2022. He instigated harassment against the 3 of us who resigned. And this is why I decided to do this work, because what he did is called network harassment in the literature, and I explain that in a minute. But there were gaps in the current model because it's so new. And then I thought that there were actually these gaps and we need to address them. So that's the next slide. So yeah, so just what we did is we're calling this work indirect swarming. And basically the phenomenon is that what happened when Elon Musk did that to us was that with content moderation, as you know, you can say something and then you'll be deplatformed, you'll be asked to leave, the post gets taken down, your account gets taken down. With Musk, he owns the platform. And secondly, he didn't actually say, go after Eliani. He just said, oh, she did a very poor job with CSAM, which is not the case. You just Google my name because it's so strange. Just the first name, you will know that I do the complete opposite. I do child line safety. But what happened was indirect swarming. This is what we call it now under the taxonomy of network harassment. Within a 24-hour period, we received 4,000 Twitter tweets every 20 minutes for a 24-hour period. And these include death threats, threats of doxing. And so they were vicious and very, very quick. So we'll talk about that in a minute. So just want to situate where we are. And this is actually my colleague's work, so I'm not going to talk about this particular graphs here. But basically, we are trying to build on previous work on online harassment. And online harassment has really moved from cyberbullying of children. You may have heard from other panels about sextortion and things like that. And also more like how harassment offline for women has moved online with romantic partners. So like stalking, sexual harassment, things like that. But with network harassment, it's quite different. With network harassment, it means that you have one person who's instigating other people to harass a target online. And he or she would do it without actually saying anything. So you can have plausible deniability. Next slide. So this is the model that currently exists. It's done by Alice Marwick. So she's based at the University of North Carolina in the USA. And basically you can see here, so Musk would be considered an amplifier in this case, and there'll be other people like him. And so he makes an accusation that's a moral accusation. Oh, she didn't do enough for pedophilia, CSAM, CSE, child sexual exploitation. And then his followers will be outraged, and then they would directly harass a target. So then death threats, doxing, things like that. Next slide. And so this is the definition currently that begins by identifying one or more norm violations and then directing it as justification for harassment. You need to justify why you're doing this very harmful act. And so what we did in our work was that Marwick didn't actually explain what amplifiers were. It was just a one sentence, like influencers. And so what we did was to expand the term to talk more about content that is most acted upon. That means somebody who posts something and his tweet or post is retweeted, quote tweeted, replied to, commented upon. We focus on Twitter or X in our case because it's the case study that we used, but it can be on a lot of other social media platforms. So of course the algorithms would differ, but basically this would apply across social media. Next slide. This is what we think are two new categories under the taxonomy of network harassment. So direct harassment would be, direct harassment would be what you and I would unfortunately, people of color, women, and in this room, we are actually have intersectional identities. We have both, we are women and people of color. You will be disproportionately harassed. So in the literature, if you are non-binary in terms of gender orientation, if you're a woman, or you are a person of color, you will be disproportionately harassed. But if you have intersectional identities, that means you identify as one or more of these identities, you'll get even more. And so, but this is what we think constitutes direct swarming. You will get this on a daily basis, but at a low level. And our research brought us out. We found that when we looked at a BBC journalist, she had 1,000 or 1,500 tweets every hour for a period of a month. So 1,500 tweets of an hour, every hour for a month. In our case, like I said earlier, we had a volume of more than 4,000 tweets every 20 minutes over a 24-hour period. So this is why it's going to be very stochastic. It's going to be a big jump and then it goes down. And this is just a constant. Hello, I'm just gonna maybe I have to do a quick recap, right? We have a few people just joining us. Hello, but please feel free, have a seat, come, yeah, make yourself comfortable. No worries at all. No worries at all. Yeah, that's a good idea. I think that might be a good idea. So it's quicker, maybe. Oh, okay. I can move my. Here, why don't you sit here?
Okay, that's kind.
No worries. Yes, please take a seat. So I just want to do a quick recap for those of us who just joined the room. So I was one of the 3 women that resigned again from the Twitter's Trust and Safety Council a month after Elon Musk bought the platform. And my reason was I gave these numbers that were quite horrifying. After he bought it for a month, the rise in insults and slurs against Black people went up by 202%, not 22, 202. Against Jews within 2 weeks, 61%. Against gay people within a month, 58%. And these are studies that other members of the council had done. And he had talked about having a council and stuff like that. We've been in existence since 2016. And I was the first representative from Asia that was female. So anyway, once we did that, I was trying to get all the council members to resign with me. There were 100 of us at a time. Only 3 of us did. And Elon Musk then instigated harassment against us. And so we received death threats, doxing threats, all sorts of stuff. And what I decided to do, I'm a doctoral student at Harvard. I decided to pivot my work from child sex trafficking in India towards this work because there were gaps in our current understanding of how online harassment happens. He owns the platform, Elon Musk. Secondly, he didn't say go after Eliani. That's, with content moderation, normally you have to remove it, blah, 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 whatever. He said, oh, she didn't do a very good job with CSAM, with sexual exploitation of children. And so that was enough to justify harassment. If you can go back to the previous model, this one, yes, perfect. So the current literature shows this model by Alice Marwick, who's at the University of North Carolina in the USA. And it's only recent, like 2021. And what she says is that there's an amplifier, so someone like Elon Musk, who's highly networked. And so in this literature, it's not clear what an amplifier is. I show in my work, that in our work, that it doesn't have to be an influencer in the traditional sense. An influencer in the traditional sense, in the literature and also in industry, is like 1 million followers. We argue that in our case for amplifiers, it can be anyone whose content is acted upon. And so Elon Musk can say something, all his followers would do something, right? And it's called covert signaling. He says something and it's all justified by moral norms. So he accuses us of contravening moral norms. His followers are outraged and then hit the target. Next slide. And so what we found was that, so this is the model network harassment. Next slide. We think there are two new categories now within network harassment. And I was just explaining that normally online harassment, the people who are most affected, just give me one or two groups of people you think would be most affected. Perfect, exactly. Who else? There will be two other groups. By harassment online. If you make it to a group, it's women, people who are non-binary gender orientation, and people of color. And so they will get more. But if you have intersectionality, non-binary gender orientation, so LGBTQIA, yeah. And so if you're intersectional, so you're Black and a woman, or you are a man and you're gay, you will have much more than the standard user. And so this has been proven over and over again. In our work, we are arguing with direct swarming that people with these identities will get a constant level of harassment. And we found that. We had a case study of a BBC journalist, Laura Kunzberg, who was the political editor of the BBC from 2015 to 2021. And hers was constant in the sense that it's 1,000, 1,500 tweets every hour for 1 month. In our case, indirect swarming, where it's just a sudden rise because amplifier comes in and instigates harassment. In our case, it was 4,000 tweets every 20 minutes over a 24-hour period. So you can see the graph is going to be like, this is going to be like this, constant. No matter what you do, whatever you say, it doesn't matter. People are just going to go after you. If they're anti-Semitic, whatever you see, it doesn't matter because they would dehumanize you. And so they would just constantly have this level of constant harassment. With this, it was just constant and then it just jumps. Because we are nobodies. People don't really know us. And then Musk was like, I don't like this person. And then all the followers went after us. And so you see the sudden rise in the line graph if you just think about the number of tweets that are there. Next slide. So these are our research objectives. What is direct swarming? Indirect swarming. This is a new term that we call under the taxonomy of network harassment. What are the methods to discern its empirical patterns? Why is it important this year? This year, there's 70 elections around the world. 4 billion people reside in these 70 countries, of which about 2 billion people are qualified to go to the polls. That's a lot of people. And what we're saying, if you're a candidate running for elections, you're a woman, you're trans, or you are a person of color, and it's the first time, somebody who doesn't want you to win can be an amplifier and say things about you that's wrong and or do moral norms violations and accuse you of things, right? So they wouldn't say things like go after so and so. They would just say like, oh, she didn't do blah blah blah. And it's all this covert signaling, and so in this year it's so important to make sure that we can do this, we can detect it. Yeah, I'll explain in a minute. Yeah, totally. Online, this is for online. It's online harassment. And it's becoming quite a feature because yes, I agree that there is a difference between online and offline. But people in the third world, even though they're not necessarily, they do have access to the internet. You're talking about demographics here. So the older population might have more SMS accessibility, but the young ones would go to internet cafes. They would still try and find out information on social media. So this is where a lot of this thing can happen, disinformation, misinformation, through moral outrage, right? Through norms where they like accuse somebody of something. And then for me, that's not just the point. The point is it might lead to offline violence. So in our case, we got death threats, doxing threats. I had to tell Harvard that there was this case happening. They didn't understand what viral was. I have to take screenshots, show it to them. And on Twitter, you can only report 5 cases at a time. And so they didn't understand what that meant, right? And so then I say, if it goes viral, somebody can come to the school and attack me and attack other students. But they were like, oh, let's call the police. The police can't tell who these people are. That's what doxing is about. You put your address in public. So a person who's harassing me will put my address in public, or you Google my name, you know I'm at Harvard. They'll go to my school and try to harm me. But that means other students will also be harmed, right? And so there are serious offline repercussions of this kind of harassment. So how do we distinguish this? And we try to do it quantitatively with methods. In the past, I think you may have heard of Gamergate. Gamergate, where people were going after women in the gaming industry. It actually began because an ex-boyfriend was upset with his girlfriend, Zoe Quinn, wrote something about her on the blog, and then people started harassing her and twisted it into another story. That's not the point. The point is 10 years on now, 2024, we still have not done enough to protect women and people who are doing this kind of stuff. So what are the methods? It's always been stories in the last 10 years, qualitative stories. So qualitative work, studies, stories, anecdotes. Now I'm saying we're going to quantify it. There is a way to detect this. And so you can't say, oh, you poor thing, it's a story, poor you. No, we don't want to not be hurt anymore. There's ways to detect this methods. Next slide. So I think, Stevie, are you online?
Yes, can you hear me?
Perfect. Yeah, so now over to you, my dear.
Hello all. So as Lynn was explaining, we wanted to try to quantify some of this harassment in a couple of different ways, a couple of different dimensions. But as Lynn was explaining, the differentiation that we see here between direct swarming and indirect swarming is that direct swarming is almost like a constant buzz of harassment that you're receiving over time, whereas indirect swarming, what really distinguishes that is a really precipitous spike and a sudden spike that bursts at an exponential rate over this very short period of time, usually like a 24 to 48 hour window. So we wanted to understand, try to quantify who's driving this harassment during these peaks of indirect swarming, and in what form is that harassment taking in terms of the engagement options on a platform like Twitter, which include things like replies, retweets, or now called reposts, and quote tweets. Can we go to the next slide, please? So one of the ways that we attempted to quantify this is something that we're calling the collab ratio. This is named after the Communication, Political Cultures, and Collaborative Economy Laboratory at the Federal University of Fluminense in Rio de Janeiro, led in an article written by Letizia Sabatini and her colleagues. This calculates the ratio of the total number of attacks. So again, replies, retweets, quote tweets that are harassing, that are clearly meant to denigrate the target or are directed at a target in a antagonistic way. The percentage of the share of those to the total number of mentions of the targets during a particular time period. And I'll explain in a minute how we went about determining what was and what was not harassing. And next slide, please. So building on a code book developed by the Center for Democracy and Technology, a nonprofit here in the United States, they had built a code book to look at harassment of politicians, political candidates. And you can see the different categories here of types of harassment that a political candidate might receive. As we went through the data, we added two new categories of the types of harassment that we were seeing in our case studies. One is piling on, where and this is often how you see harassment happen, especially on Twitter. A user, like in this case Elon Musk, responds to a tweet that has a negative sentiment about our targets, and their followers jump into a reply thread and just signal agreement or innovate and improvise on that harassment and just again pile on like a dog pile. The other type of harassment that we added to the CDT's codebook here was covert signaling. Again, what really distinguishes indirect swarming from direct swarming and from other types of kind of recognized harassment is that the harassment or the intention to harass or the direction to harass is never made really explicit. And this helps to avoid content moderation policies. But rather than saying, hey, Eliani is a terrible person, you should all go swarm and harass her. There is a moral declaration made of like, this person did a bad thing and they're a bad person. And now a spotlight has been shown on them, and the swarm will form. So through this form of covert signaling. Next slide, please. So here's an example of piling on. As Eliani mentioned earlier, one of our case studies was Laura Kuenssberg, who you there in the UK are probably familiar with, former political editor at the BBC. Here is a reply thread to a tweet from several years ago, where the first reply here in the thread makes reference to a party that I'm led to understand was a small scandal over there in the UK about a Christmas party at number 10 Downing Street. And there were allegations that Laura Kuenssberg had been at that party, baseless allegations, as I understand it. There's no evidence that she was. But this became a talking point on social media among her harassers from across the political spectrum, who would, anytime she tweeted anything, related or unrelated to COVID, to her work at number 10 Downing Street, somebody would inevitably jump into her mention saying, were you at the party? And here we have Velcro Feet replying to that reply, saying, of course she was, expressing belief that, yes, she was at the party, and basically piling on and adding on to the harassment. So that's what we're talking about with piling on. Our next dimension.
I can do this part. Yeah.
Oh yeah, actually, Lynn,
Yeah.
Can you explain this because
Cool.
you understand protective correlate better than I.
So that's just one method. It's more like to start. If you could just go back to the 2 slides ago. Before. So this one is our ratio, right? So what Stevie was mentioning was that we work with we talked to this bunch of researchers in Brazil. So Sabatini et al. And their lab is called CoLab. That's why we came up with this ratio and said, can we use a ratio and name it after you guys? They're like, yeah, sure. So this is what happened. But basically what they studied was that federal deputies in the Brazilian parliament, so under Bolsonaro in 2021, who were being targeted in that parliament. And so they found that people who had more online presence were targeted less. People who had less social media, low social media presence were, like, in terms of number of attacks, there was just much more. And so then with this ratio of attacks, it also shows that, like, people in the Twitter Council who are not as known, we will get disproportionately more harassment. Like the BBC journalist Laura Kuenssberg. The next slide. Next slide. Before. Yeah, so basically, like Laura Kuenssberg, right? So she would have supporters supporting her. And so the numbers will kind of weigh up because you have supporters or fans coming in to help you. But if you are not a public figure, a researcher, like people in this room, or academicians or educators, people will come after you and there'll be no one coming in to help you. Because also bystander intervention is not really a thing online. Next slide. So then the other method, that was just the first cut, like, are you a public figure or you're not a public figure? If you're not a public figure, beware that when these things happen, like Elon Musk type amplifier stuff happens, your followers are just going to be silent, your fans. So here, then what we tried to look at is the engagement. So what we told you about was the numbers, right? It was very high. Like once Elon Musk posted 4,000 tweets every 20 minutes over a 24-hour period. And so we want to measure that. right? When was the peak of the swarm? We call it a swarm because we want to change things, how things are being done on social media. We don't want it to be say, oh, we're definitely sure it's going to be harassment. For a person undergoing harassment, like swarming, you're getting notifications every single time someone posts, right? So that's for me 4,000 times every 20 minutes. It was literally like that. And so then the experience is overwhelming. So unless you look at every single one, you can't tell whether it's a supportive tweet or a harassing tweet. Most of the time, it was harassing, 95%. So we call it a swarm because we want to make it easier for the social media platforms. That means we are suggesting the user themselves decide the swarming event is either a positive viral event, it's positive. We're going viral. We just launched a new shop. People love it. People are posting about it. It's a good thing, right? It's a swarm. You also will get that peak, right? But if you're being harassed, you also get a peak. But user will decide, is this a good experience for me or not? And then you call it in. You report it. But what I want to do is establish the quantification methods so that we can try and convince the social media platforms to do this. And we have spoken to a former person from Twitter because I was advising at Twitter and also at Google, and they like it. The question is, can we try and prevent this? Can we report it and prevent it from happening before it goes viral? And usually in the industry, a virality event can happen within 3 hours. So you want to kind of catch it before it becomes viral. So here is the quantification method. So really engagement is, as you know, like original tweets, quote tweets, retweets, replies, and likes. And then we look at what's original tweet. So like Elon Musk posts, what happens with that tweet in terms of engagement? And so then if it's like, the ratio, how high is it? And then what we tried to do was to weight it. We have to weight it and this is based on what the industry does. So Twitter themselves have an amplification process, like a prioritization. So if sometimes, you look at posts, how does it go up? How does it go viral? Whatever. So these are the kind of weightage that's being done in the industry. Not enough research is being done in this space, but the companies themselves do it. And so this is the weightage that we used, similar to what Twitter is currently, X is now currently doing. And so then we did the same, right, to do that over tweets. So it's actually intuitively simple. You have a post, how much is it being engaged on, and weigh it based on the platform's way of prioritizing it. And so if you like something, it's going to go up. How much high? The platform decides. You follow their weightage. Next slide. So research findings. So this is the case study, right? Of this is what happened to us. So we wanted to resign, and then Mike Sunovich, so that's me, Eliani, so my two colleagues, Ann Colley and Leslie Podesta. And Mike Sunovich, he's an alt-right figurehead in the US. He's famous for Pizzagate. Have you heard Pizzagate? Pizzagate, people on the right, alt-right, believe that Democrats eat children, and they have and they do it in a basement parlor of a pizza. And a guy actually went in there with a gun. So it's a thing. So he did that, and he's also one of the main proponents behind Gamergate, right? And so then he said, "You all belong in jail." Moral accusation. And then he attached this thing. Twitter refused to remove child porn. A 2-year-old article that has nothing to do with us, because we don't do daily ops. We are an advisory council. And I didn't bring my flask, but all I got from them after 6 years of work was not a single penny, just a Twitter flask, a flask. That's it. And normally I bring it with me, but today I'm like, I just flew in for Abu Dhabi. I'm completely zoned out. But that's all we got. So we're not employees. And so then Elon Musk replied. So look at this. Look at the number of engagement, right? Look at this, 7,000 retweets, 52,000 likes. Musk then replied, "It is a crime that they refuse to take action on child exploitation for years." He agrees. He calls us criminals. Look at the engagement again. 18,000 retweets, 109,000 likes. So again, this thing went viral. Next slide. Sarah, are you there? Sarah? Probably not. Okay, fine. So this is what I meant when we talk about indirect swarming. So we are like not known, right? So it's just humdrum, humdrum, humdrum. We posted here our resignation post. Nothing, right? Very low, very low. Sunovich posted here, started going up. Musk posted around here. Look at the numbers now. So if you look at the numbers here, it's 4,000 engagement, retweets every 20 minutes over 24 hours. That's shocking. If you talk about direct swarming, where it's constant misogyny, anti-Semitism, it'll be like this. a direct line across the room. Across. That's the difference. Next. We don't have Sarah here. Is she there? Sarah? Okay, fine. So we had like different methods to like look at data visualization work. That's not critical right now. Next slide. What we're trying to show really is that only when someone like an amplifier posts, so like the types Elon Musk posts, then the swarm happens, not before. Someone like an amplifier posts, and then the swarm will suddenly rose. And then we try to prove that, and then we show that. Next slide. And yeah, and so then what we did was then again, like I said, nothing happens. Mike Sunovich. And then Tim Pool. So Tim Pool again he's more on the far right in the US, so he piled on. You can see the steep curve. So this is a cumulative line graph, right, of all tweets, retweets, quote tweets, and replies to the resignation tweet that we posted. And then you see the change in slope curve. It means that suddenly there is a sudden rise. That's what it means. And you can see here, and this is Musk. And it just shot up. Next slide. Sarah's here? Oh, hello. Sorry, Sarah. Are you there?
I am.
Okay, cool. Do you want to go and take over and then go back to any of the slides up on the methods?
Yes, we can do that. Can you go back
cool.
to
Thank
slide
you.
18?
So Sarah's a postdoc at the University of Constance in Germany, member of my research team.
Yes. So we tried to. So what we tried doing is we took the entire data set of what had happened with all the records of all the tweets that were tweeted, that were done in this time period, and we tried to visualize through the tools given to us with data visualizations. We try to visualize what had happened, and if these tweets from amplifiers had a visible effects. And what we were trying to do was, can we identify who are the amplifiers through visualization, right? So this, what you're looking at, is just the count of tweets that had happened for each time step. So with the little labels below, with these little notes, you can see that the explosion in tweets didn't really happen when the initial tweet was done from Anne, but it actually happened when at first Cernovich tweeted something, and then when Elon tweeted something, it really exploded in size. The amount of people that were talking about this, that were tweeting about this, and that were answering these tweets that were being done. So you really see the effect of that an amplifier has on the amount of things that are being said in a particular moment. Can you go to the next slide? So here we were trying to automatically identify who these people could be. And these line charts, because the dataset was so huge, we took the dataset and split it into smaller chunks, smaller time frames. So it was easier to see what was going on. And then we took the 10 people with the most mentions, retweets, with the most interactions being done to them in the dataset, and try to visualize at what point in the dataset these people had tweeted something, had interacted in some way. So can you go to the next slide? So you can see here at the beginning of this line, because Cernovich and Elon Musk were in this set of the 10 people that tweeted the most, then you can see that they did something here. These are tweets. Where these vertical bars are appearing, it means that each one of these people did something at the time, and these vertical bars caused a spike in the amount of tweets being done at the time. So this is a possible attempt of something that could be done to perhaps start in the process of identification of these events. And the next slide contains instead the cumulative counts. Instead of tweets by timestamp, time step, you have just the cumulative count of tweets that were being done at a certain point. And in the same way, you can again see where the amplifying tweets happened. So now here, in this case, we know what were the two tweets that caused this huge explosion in tweets being done, but what if you replicate the same experiment with somebody else where you have less knowledge about what was going on? Perhaps we can use visualization to identify these events. This is what we are trying to test. Yeah, and I think the visualization part is
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Sarah. So just to recap, so we're trying to show methods that people can do for research. So either you are researchers here in this room and you're doing a historical work, that means you're going back to the past. We know harassment happened to a group of people or certain targets, and you want to find who did that to them. And so then the slope changes, previous slide, will show you like where the changes happen, and you go to those points in your API data sets and find out who had posted around this time. That's how you can identify your amplifiers. So that's one very easy method to do that. And then what Sarah was saying before, previous slide, the messy one. I mean, the one with lots of lines. Beef bears? Yeah. So this one too, like what Sarah was saying, the ones that were most engaged with, who was engaging most with what, and then these are the peaks. And it's also another way to look at it. So thank you, Sarah. It's very, very good. So go back to forward. This one, yes. Stevie, over to you, please.
Yes. So as I mentioned earlier, there were two dimensions that we were quantifying this based on. The collab ratio looked at the share of total tweets that were or total engagement that was harassing or that was directly attacking our targets in each case. Now, to determine that, we would have to have manually reviewed every single tweet in our data set, which was 122,450 for this Twitter Council case. That would take a very, very long time. So we took a 1% sample. We randomized all of the entries within our data set, and then assigned each of them a random number and took just a 1% sample. So it's a 1,208 total entries, a little easier to manage. So these were all tweets responding or engaging in some way with Ann Collier's original tweet announcing the resignation of the 3 council members. So next slide, please. And in this case, what we found was that 68%, 825 total entries in our random sample were harassing in one way or another, compared to just 32% that were either supportive or irrelevant, non-harassing, had nothing to do with the case whatsoever. And here on the right-hand side of that slide, you can see a rather egregious example of the kind of harassment that the council members were receiving. This is I don't even know if you can call this covert, but it's a slang term, at least here in the United States, for a death threat. To dirt nap somebody is to put them in the dirt. And so, this is a particularly egregious example, but representative of some of the harassment that the council members were receiving. So next slide.
Thank you.
I think,
I'm here,
Lynn,
right?
you were going to explain this part?
Yeah, I mean, just going to be very quick about this because we don't have to go into details, but these are 3 of the amplifiers that we identified. So you remember the slope, we had these 3 colored points there. So then we went to look at the numbers of engagement. So again, Stevie, members of the team, went in to determine how many, what was the engagement level, who was involved. And I remember that the ratio that we talked about, if you can go a few slides back to the before. Yes, this one. So then we did this again. So we just looked at that and weigh it, right? So now go back to the slide we were on. Yes, so then we actually found these ratios. And so what we tried to do was to do a 5-minute interval. So after 5 minutes, so this guy posted Mike Sonovich, all right, figurehead, Pizzagate and Gamagate, 5 minutes. This is a level ratio. That means for his post, there was 44 amount of engagement with the weightage, this thing. After 20 minutes, it rose. But if you look at Elon Musk, after 5 minutes, it was this really high number. And then it was this ridiculous number 2 as well. But as well, because the time period when they posted, they were also interacting. There's a mediating effect. And so then we have to figure out what that means. But we're trying to keep it really simple. So that means if someone calls it in, a user calls it in and say, hey, I'm experiencing indirect swarming, can you run the ratios? And then if they think, okay, these are the thresholds, you reach the threshold, you freeze and chill the person's timeline. So no one can interact with your post anymore. Your notification will stop. You will stop having this horrifying experience of getting constant notifications. So, but what is the actual threshold? We need more data. So those of you who are doing research with Twitter or X would know that as of spring last year, Musk pulled free access for academics. And so you can't do it unless you pay 42K at least to 212,000 a month, not even a year, a month. 42K to 212,000. And so you need more data in order to determine the threshold. We think it may look like this, but we really need to run a few cases, a few hundred maybe, in order to have that threshold. And having just said that, people can game it, right? Once you know the actual threshold number, if you think you can game it, it depends, because also it depends on the swarm, who's involved. People may want to engage with you, but do it just below the threshold. So again, all these things can be gamified, but we're trying to see that there is a method. These things are quantifiable. Take people who are being harassed seriously, and social media platforms should change. Next slide. So this is what I'm talking about. So basically a workflow process. So indirect swarming is detected by the user. The target calls it in. But look, if I'm getting a death threat or getting a doxing threat, and in fact that happened to Yoel Roth. Do you remember him? So he was Twitter's head of trust and safety. So he actually worked as an employee. But Musk took one of his PhD theses out of context, and because Yoel is gay, he said something like, "Oh, they mix well," but he made some insinuation about Grindr. That was his subject thesis on Grindr. His followers harassed him. He actually got death threats, so he left his home in California and left with his husband. So these things actually happen, and so then. When you go undergoing death threats and doxing threats, you have other priorities. And so what we propose is to have like a circle of friends, 5 people, that you can now, before anything happens to you, say, these are the 5 people I want you to pay attention to if they report on my behalf. Why do we say that? Because let's say you're running elections this year, 70 elections around the world. You're running for election, say in country, let's just call it Uganda, for example, right? And then your opponent hates what's happening to you. You're doing viral, it's positive, it's really great. And they're like, no, she calls it in and say it's actually harassment against her. It's swarming. But we shouldn't let that happen. We should only let the platforms agree to any reports by you yourself or your 5 circle of friends. Platform runs the ratios. If it's confirmed, you freeze or chill engagement, so the swarming stops. Literally, we just stop. Go on, next slide. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Is there any question in in-person attendees?
And also Stevie and Sarah are online, so you can maybe put on their faces if that helps, maybe.
Thank you. I have no words. Oh, God knows I love to talk, but right now I'm like speechless. So I personally left social media a few years ago because of the impact on my mental health. But obviously I follow the news and everything. And I'm just wondering how you keep doing what you're doing despite the harassment, the challenges, and also how do you look after your mental health throughout all of this?
Let me describe it in a few phases. And Stevie, feel free to jump in because Stevie also went through something similar. So after, sorry, maybe I should have said that, but I think it's important to also amplify what you've done. The period when I resigned, the media in the US was so sick and tired of Musk. I didn't think with 3 women resigning, it would make a difference. We did a press release. I was in the Foreign Service of Singapore, so I've done media. I was a media spokesperson. I knew how the media is run. And I told the council members, I'll give you till the Thursday. We can't wait till the weekend. This Friday onwards, the media won't pick it up. It'd be like, who was going to run a story? Run a story by maximum Thursday. So we also have to be very strategic when you do something. But still, I didn't think it was going to be viral. So rule 101, basic rule 101 broken, I put my Gmail address up there like an idiot. It's in press release. So of course I also got docs up there. But anyway, so that was the first phase. It went viral. I had like 50 interviews within a week. I had to tell the school so that, it was not like other students would get, threats and all that stuff. It was really, really difficult. But I wanted to do it because I believed in what I was doing. The numbers were horrific. You can't have 202% rise in slurs and insults against Black people, 61% rise against anti-Semitic insults, 58% rise against Jews, like all these insults and slurs. You cannot do that. So no matter what happened, I wanted to stand by my values. That was the initial period. But a lot of people were afraid, and on the council, they remained for various reasons. They remained because there were also safety implications. They're doing human rights, say in Myanmar, Bangladesh, right? I mean, there's also very valid reasons. Some of them had day tech jobs. They were afraid of repercussions on their own day work. But at the time, people didn't know how to respond. But the US media was very supportive. And then it jumped the point. It went to the BBC. So so we resigned on Thursday, like I mentioned, 8th December. On the Monday, the 12th December, Musk wanted to monetize his blue tick. Remember that? So at first it was free. It was based on how notable you are, whether you're a public figure or not. He made it into a $8 service, right? $8 a month service. That was the day he wanted to announce it. That was also the day our interviews came out on the BBC and NPR, both sides of the pond. He was so outraged. He was so incensed. He fired everybody else on the council who remained, 96 of them. Yeah, he did that. So there were various phrases. And then in the tech world, in the US, I haven't lived in Europe for a while. I lived there like a long time ago, and I lived in the US for 10 years. But in the US, there's this giant admiration for capitalism. And then it matters much more than values or morality, especially in big tech. But now, a year on, so that like last year, All Human is Tech. It's like a social movement in the US. They named what we had done, the three of us, in resigning as a key moment in the field of trust and safety. But for me, I'm like, it's ethics. Isn't that a thing? But it's still like you're pushing boundaries within big tech, because like the wild, wild west. People don't understand how to navigate the space. I also want to highlight what Stevie had done, because if it's okay, Stevie.
Oh,
you want to say you should?
Yeah.
I just made the intro, and now I'm going to hand over to you. But Stevie
Sure.
was working for the Anti-Defamation League, and with Gaza, what happened was that his CEO conflated anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, and so he was going after the Jewish left. And this is when Stevie decided to leave. So over to you, Stevie. What happened
sure.
after that?
So I don't know how familiar you all are with the Anti-Defamation League, but it's in the United States the oldest anti-hate nonprofit advocacy group, civil rights organization,
and also a Twitter council member.
Oh, and former Twitter council member. And I was working there as a researcher for the Center for Technology and Society. Actually analyzed Lynn's case early on as it was happening. And but I after 10/7, our CEO Jonathan Greenblatt was going on American cable television, calling people animals, which I'm no fan of Hamas, but I think that when you're an anti-hate organization, you can't also be dehumanizing people, regardless of what they have done or who they are. So that kind of hurt our credibility. But the last straw for me was he called left-wing Jewish groups that were protesting the war the photo inverse of white supremacists, basically drawing a false equivalency between these peace protesters and white supremacists, who were, one of the main things that we were trying to fight against at ADL. And for me, this undermined the ability that I had to do my work. I resigned, and I posted my resignation on Blue Sky, which is a kind of a Twitter alternative, still in I think closed beta. Not a very well-known social media site. I didn't figure that anybody would take notice. I had couple hundred followers. I figured I was just kind of speaking into the void. Well, somebody screenshotted that, shared it on Twitter, where I am no longer active. And all of a sudden I was being, contacted by journalists, and so on and so forth. It went viral for a little bit, not nearly to the extent that Lynn and the Twitter Council members experienced, but it was still a little surprising. It was an interesting couple of days. But to answer the question, what do you do to take care of your mental health? For me, getting off Twitter was a big one. I no longer have a personal presence on Twitter, and I'm very glad that I did, because I was not even tempted to read any engagement that happened with the screenshot of my resignation. I have no idea what people were saying about me. I'm sure a lot of it was terrible. On Blue Sky, all of the engagement that I got was very positive. People congratulating me, which I don't know whether that was a sign of the times, a sign of the platform, what have you. I mean, the other kind of elephant in the room is I am a white man. I receive less harassment. I'm statistically less likely to receive harassment online than other folks from other identities, and so. I'm sort of protected by my personal identity. But getting off of Twitter, I think it's like one really good thing to do for your mental health.
Yeah, I agree. And for me, it's really an important thing that I think I can do, like leverage my voice, because the media will go away, right? And so for me, it's important to leverage the media while I still have the voice and there's still media interest. And so it's only a year on, and I do get a lot of media comments whenever there's a new feature, like with Facebook and Threads, for example. They're like, what do you think about a new feature? So anniversaries of the layoffs, anniversary of the firing, stuff like that. So it's good. It's good to have that voice. And for me, I'm not afraid, because in some ways, I was a diplomat. And so we had intelligence training, counterintelligence training. And in that way, because I was 10 years a diplomat, my family is also familiar with that kind of work. It's not similar, but the level of risk is similar. And so then when I had the threats of doxing, it was very graphic. It was like, again, they were very smart. These users are all very, very smart. They don't say things like, that one was unusual, the death threat one that you saw online, but there were others that were emailed to us, because again, I'm very smart. Me putting my Gmail address on that, but they would say things like, well, I want to see you die. I want to see you die. And then they describe graphically in 3 different ways, like really, really graphic, but they don't say like, I will do it to you, but I want to see you die in this ways. And then you're like, okay, so I need to then inform the school in case they do come to the school. But that's always horrifying, I think. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, can I add one more thing there, Lynn, actually, is that, perhaps this is obvious to others, but harassment of this sort is really a chilling and silencing of speech, right? And so Elon Musk likes to talk a lot about how he's a free speech absolutist, right? He bought Twitter to make it a safe space for free speech, and because there was too much censorship going on. And one of the things that I think our work points to, and other colleagues of ours have pointed to, is that by allowing this swarming of harassment, this actually works counter to the principles of free speech, because it pushes people off of social media platforms that whose voices are important, because they can no longer be safe on those platforms. Fighting for this is a free speech issue, I believe.
Thank you for that, Stevie. And this is an important point to raise. This is why we also want to do this work and highlight it this year, because of the 70 elections I mentioned around the world. Because what we're arguing is that amplifiers as a category of actors need to be looked at. Because, and for example, in the US, it's difficult because of the First Amendment. Free speech is protected. But what we want to argue, and I've written a brief, a policy brief that's going to go up on Monday to the Hill, so the US Congress Federal Election Commission, is to say that this is a category of actors that you should look at. And I know in the US, the First Amendment doesn't allow it, but look at it for foreign actors. Think 2016 US elections, what happened there, Russia and China, and also bots. So that's just one thing that would affect democracy, because you will silence people who are trying to run for elections online. That's one. The other thing also is that there's this thing called generative AI, right? And so with generative AI, you have the generative foundational models. So I'm not worried about deep fakes and figures and stuff like that. Generative foundational models, GFM, is a way to convince you with messaging. That's very niche. And I think the keynote speaker earlier was talking about targeted messaging. She doesn't agree with that. It could be more like best messaging. Well, we'll see. But there is the possibility in the future that looking at how you post on social media or how you like on social media, that you will make it in a way that's targeted, that will compel you to vote for something, like vote for a political candidate due to disinformation because of generative AI. And we worry about that. And the point of the work for policy making, because I was a diplomat, I did policy work, is to think ahead. Right now with tech and how the US companies are all domiciled in the US, and of course we have the EU AI Act, really brilliant. But for the rest of the world, we are catching up. We're constantly playing catch up. And in the US, the companies are there because of Section 230 of the Communications Act. And that's also very obvious. Section 230 means that the social media companies are not liable for the content posted on their platforms. And so then what do we do about all this? But what I'm arguing, not necessarily the members of my team won't necessarily agree, but what I'm arguing is that we need to think ahead. These actors, with our work, quantifiable work, by the way, not stories anymore, shows that when they act, swarming happens, which leads to offline violence, death threats, doxing. And so we know that this sequence of events happened and they're quantifiable and there's data for it. So can we actually start looking at governing these actors and perhaps start with foreign actors before things get too crazy with generative AI? Because this is just before generative AI even kicks in, right? We're not even talking about generative AI in this particular situation. When it kicks in, it's going to be really, really messy.
Is there any question coming from online participants? Is there any question from in person?
Sarah, do you want anything you want to add? Are you still there?
Yes, I am here.
Do you want to add anything to the conversation? Yeah.
Well, the questions, right? The question that we got right now has been more about mental health, about how to fight personally on the individual level these things, and I've been working on it a lot more on just the data analysis part. Not very involved in making policies in social media at all. Like, I don't use it, I explore it.
But still valuable work. Yeah.
Hmm?
Still valuable work. Without your work, it's not easy to understand what the numbers mean.
Yeah, I do not 100% agree with the fact that we can automate the entire process. I think what we hope to be able to do is make these things more evident, more immediate, to aid human actors in helping with this, not completely to replace the process by automating it completely. There's also a lot of complicated language to analyze. The irony can be very fine. The meaning of words can be very, very complicated to understand, and that in certain contexts, people become very, very skilled at avoiding automatic detection, right? The content of images too. The threads can be sent through memes, through pictures. We collected those too in the data sets that we have at hand, but identifying exactly the meaning of the fine irony in an image, we're not still at the level to be able to do that. I mean, we can make it very explicit.
No, thank you, Sarah. She raises a very important point, because when Elon Musk was trying to, when he fired the council, and also he said he wanted to have another council, right? He was saying we can automate all these things, automate content moderation. That means I automate and find the slurs against different groups of people, anti-Semitic things, or insults against Black people, for example. You can't do that. That's why the council member was there in the first place. So, for example, in my work on child online safety, what pedophiles do to identify one another is that they call themselves minority attracted people, MAP, which is like a map, right? And so they have a globe emoji of a globe. And then you see an emoji to an emoji, they're like, oh, okay, I'm one of you. Let's talk offline. Let's DM, let's direct mention to each other. And so then we tell Twitter or X now, this is the emoji that's being used. But of course, they will move on to another emoji once they know. It's constant evolving language, spelling. And so like take the steal, right? Steal the elections in the US. The steal is spelled with 4 L's to circumvent content moderation. By of course, if you just put steal, you will see, oh, everything is take the steal, the hashtag take the steal. You will just like take those posts offline. But they will keep innovating by adding more else. That's one very silly example, but it's actually what happened with January 6th. And so I agree with Sarah. Our work is just to begin the discussion, to catalyze, make it easier and more helpful for users, especially this year. Our work is not meant to replace a nuanced approach towards content moderation. It's a stopgap measure. Unless we change how platforms are designed, which is really monetizing our attention, right? So the longer you're on it, the more you engage with it, that's what they really want. Do they want things to be happy? No, they want things to be as offensive, as hateful as possible, because statistically, that's what keeps people online. And so then we want to make sure it's only a stopgap measure until these platforms can be redesigned and or different things can happen. But this needs to also happen to protect users from being harassed the way we were.
Well, that you're talking about a phenomenon online. Of course, it's an international phenomena. Hatred, levels of hatred worldwide, throughout the world, not online per se, but in every platform, have gone ballistic in the last year or two since COVID. And the entire world, much in the free world and in the non-free world, hates Israel at the moment. And that can be interpreted into, it's Holocaust Memorial Day today. You can interpret that as anti-Semitism, but there is a deep hatred of Israel. There's a deep hatred of Russia over Ukraine that is particularly in Western Europe and America a phenomenon, more a Western phenomenon, but not a worldwide phenomenon, but it's massive. Then going back, the time of Floyd and so on, there was actually quite a hatred being expressed by some in the Black community of the white community in America. And you got that. I mean, my goddaughter, very bizarrely, is a dog catcher in Georgia. And she had to stop wearing her uniform because it looks like a police uniform. And she's just a girl, and she used to get tremendous abuse at the time of Floyd and all that. So the world now is filled with massive levels of hatred we haven't seen since the Second World War. It's a new phenomena. And when you talk about, and it's been a phenomenon in Britain particularly because we've had other issues, as you have in America, like migration, and issues like Brexit. Here you haven't had, but so the levels of rage being expressed in society are at a new ballistic, all my lifetime, I've never seen this, and I'm cracking on. But certainly you go back to the Second World War times and you had this. So this is not just an online phenomena. You're reflecting something that's happening to society, and it is a corruption of society, I believe, but it's not restricted to the online world.
For millennia, for centuries, right? Disinformation, misinformation is not a new thing. Ever since Gutenberg invented the press, you actually will have it at a bigger scale and speed. I mean, that's what happened before. For example, you have to have calligraphy done by hand by monks, and then you had the Gutenberg press, and then the Bible was able to be spread much more quickly. But you're completely right. This polarization has happened before, and now is what my team and I are worried about is that with social media and online processes make things simpler on the surface, right? Because you see this thing, you like it, you can do certain things with it, you engage with it, and you may feel good about yourself and or feel you're contributing towards a cause. And that's can be a very good thing. At the same time, you feel that there's a community or collective effort towards certain things. We're very cautious in the work that we do, in the sense that we try to make sure it's about swarming. So it can be against, like you said, it could be people who are experiencing both sides of the war in Gaza, for example. We're not saying that it's only one side or the other. It's up to the user to decide what experience he or she is having, and to say, I don't like this experience. I want to silence my post right now. And so that right should be for every single user, which is not there right now. And that's what I'm proposing. So we're not trying to play right or left politics. I think it's very, very difficult to say, because a lot of the discussion right now also, I think it's just not nuanced enough. And let's not even go to the specifics of what that means. It's just not nuanced. And online stuff makes it harder to have those kind of conversations. And we are in bell jars to some extent. So a lot of the literature always talks about how we're in bell jars and we're not interacting. I disagree. My members of the team can also jump in. But basically what's happening with Twitter or Facebook and stuff like that, for example, with Musk, right? We just said we want to resign. End of story. He took it and he put it into a different audience, right? To be harassed. This is what happens on social media. You think you are giving this to your followers and your audience. Someone else can take it, hijack the conversation, and put it somewhere else that you didn't think was going to happen to you. And so social media collapses boundaries. For example, the best example, offline example I can think of is going to a wedding, right? Your mother-in-law is there, your best friend's there, your friends from work could be there. Suddenly your world is like, oh my God, all together, one place for a disaster waiting to happen. A wedding, I think, would be the best social equivalent. But normally, your social situations are segregated. You go with your mates to the pub, you would go to work, you would go, have dinner out with your loved ones. Separate conversations, each with its separate norms and boundaries. Social media, all that collapses, especially with an amplifier. And that's what we're also trying to prevent, because you have all these wars going on, all these conversations going on, and it becomes simplified. And then people like Elon, amplifiers can make it worse through disinformation, through simplifying things, when what we need is actually more nuanced conversations, and it's not going to be held online.
Right here? Oh, no? Oh, okay. Thank you very much. I would agree with the last discussion that we are dealing with human nature in some way, a cyclical kind of, I don't know, craziness that happens once every 70 years. But social media has made this cycle peak, and just in very real ways. But anyway, I am almost finished my PhD, thank God. And I'm looking at user agency and legislation, basically. But I've come to the realization that I think the only way, personally, I think we can fix this, and you alluded to this a few minutes ago, is by undermining the business model. I don't think, we talked about this in earlier groups, I don't think that censorship works. I don't think that moderation works. I think the only thing that will work is to change. You shouldn't be able to make money by psychologically manipulating people on such a fundamental level. So I think that's the only thing that's going to get better. But what I find, so in that respect, I see government policy as a way forward on this, and also gets past the censorship weeds, because that's just a minefield. But I've done focus groups with users as part of my dissertation, and what I'm shocked by. So I'm doing my dissertation in Ireland. I am American, and of course, sorry, a little bit. Thank you, but of course, I would expect in the United States for there to be like an unabashed kind of like bow to capitalism, obviously. But in Ireland, I find users, and I've done focus groups with students like first year college students. I've also done focus groups with people in the community. So at adult education centers, not just with quote unquote elite groups of users. And a consistent finding in my groups is that people place the responsibility for fixing the online world mostly with just the user, and no one ever mentions the company ever. And they also, it's kind of their attitude is very often, well, of course, they're companies, they're going to do whatever they want to do. It's my responsibility. It's almost like you get a carte blanche if you're making money. And we need to get away from this idea that you can do anything to make money. I don't know what the solution is, but
I hear you, and I really like that. I think those of us in the room who are in this space, when you're asked to do a speech and you get paid for it by a company to say blah blah blah, like for example, online safety, right? Child online safety. And so then a bank pays me and says, "Hey, Eliani, can you go and tell parents what to do?" And I'm like, no, I don't want to tell parents what to do. We should be advocating for social media companies to change the way they do things so parents don't have to worry about these things. So some of the things are actually very simple and we don't talk enough about them. So for example, like for example, you can have parental controls, right? So you can register every device and such that, so then there's an age thing and then the child is a unique identifier for every device. And at 6 p.m., all across the country, your device shuts down because of your age group, right? Your child 12 years and under, 6 p.m. It doesn't have to shut down, it could slow down. And the kid would be frustrated. The kid would be like, oh, it's so slow, I'm going to stop. There's no point telling a kid to stop at whatever time. That's not going to work. But you slow it down, they will move away from the device. Things are that simple, actually. But companies don't do it because they don't want to. They want to monetize. And I've been talking to Frances Haugen. She's the whistleblower from Facebook. And she has very simple solutions too. Because for her, it's about slowing down. We need to spend less time on devices and slow down. So she says things like, we need to sleep more. It's very simple, but who's online up at night posting? People who are angry, who are upset, who are venting. So when we get up, the algorithms think that this is what we want to see, right? And so this is crazy vicious cycle of the algorithms working on things when people have to pay more attention to something was actually negative. If more of us go to bed and sleep at night and spend less time on the devices, this is what to do. That's her thing, which I think is quite cute and very funny. My thing is redesign everything. Don't make it infinite posts. So there are things like at Harvard, so I'm at Harvard, there's a Berkman Klein Center, there's a fellow there, and I think he calls his app finite, something like this. And you can only have 100 posts in a lifetime. Think about it, 100 posts, right? So some people are doing poetry, haiku style, and they post it, and then they'd be so particular, like this is the one post, and there's 99 left, right? And so you're not gonna waste your thing by engaging with some nonsensical stuff because you want to be really clear why you're doing it. So make it finite. Make it the number of likes that you can do finite as well. Don't make it like I can do 1,000. Like, do you see the numbers on the screen just now when I posted it? When Elon Musk is engaging with us, it's like I can't remember 70,000 retweets. Why would you allow that? Right? You enable harassment. You are actually allowing it to happen. So maybe you could just say 100 retweets, 100 likes, limit the number. Limitation is the thing. But because of the business model, but we need to rethink how we look at engaging with each other as humans. Why does it have to be negative? Why are we not having more apps where it's happy things? Why is it, I mean, of course we do talk about cat videos and dog videos, but beyond that, how do we monetize that kind of behavior better? Why are we not talking about that more than what we're doing about the hate, right?
Interesting. WhatsApp, which is becoming still quite fashionable. If you share something, if it's shared multiple times, you can only share it with one person. I don't know whether you've noticed that. I mean, maybe is that the kind of thing sorry, I'm just saying WhatsApp. If you share things multiple times, you can only then share it with one person because it suddenly limits the number of times it can be shared.
Yeah, so they had to change that policy because before they allow it, and then now it's limited to 25 reshares. I think it's even lower now, right? And so that's what you can do as a company. You can limit things. It will actually reduce harassment because it's about engagement. It's simple maths. And then if I have, let's not say 100. Let's say I can only reshare 5 times. or engage 5 times in any way. I can like or retweet or reply 5 ways. Would I engage in harassment then? No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't want to waste it, you know?
Well, it's not the fact that once, you share something, okay, I'm going to share it with 5 people.
Yeah.
But then now you can only share them one by one.
Is it?
And
Oh.
so you can't multiples, you can't.
Yeah.
And that's a neat thing, I think.
Yeah.
I don't see it's so neat to stop you sharing it,
No.
but if you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on what people like. People may not like that, and so they may leave that platform. They want to stay on a platform where they can do with multiple users. So WhatsApp is limiting in that way. But there's ways to have this conversation. Sarah, Stevie, do you guys want to chime in?
Yeah, I just wanted to completely agree with the comment that the problem at base is the business model. This is something that I've been working on for a couple of years now, and would have liked to continue working on it at my old job. But as you may know, the gentleman who raised this point. Ethan Zuckerman, who's a professor of media studies at UMass Amherst, called this the internet's original sin. Was if we go back to the mid 90s and the rise of the public internet, there was some might call it a devil's bargain that was made to fund the internet, not through public funds, but through advertising, basically. That was how we were going to bankroll online innovation and everything. And for social media, most of these platforms don't make any money, or they in their early years they run at a loss, right? Their value proposition is as a data creation, collection, and surveillance tool that then they can pitch to advertisers. To say, like, look, we have a user base of billions of people if you're Facebook, and we know all of these different things about those people, and we can help you, advertiser, get your message to the right person at the right time, in the right way. Like, you can tailor your message better than at any point in the history of advertising. I mean, it's a dream come true, right, for advertisers. And that, combined with the size of these platforms, makes it very, very difficult to enact trust and safety at scale. So without a massive investment in the trust and safety operations at platforms, which are tend to be much, much smaller than some of their other operations, we're never going to get out of this kind of a morass that we find ourselves in. But again, I agree with the statement that this isn't, this shouldn't be about censorship, and it shouldn't be about self-regulation, right? It shouldn't be about putting the onus on the user. This is at base a question about business models, about how how your product makes money. And think about consumer safety law. If you were to create a product that was responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people, there would be a product recall in most cases. Where is that kind of call for social media? How do you recall a social media product? There was one other point I wanted to make here. One solution that I would be interested in seeing pushed along more in my home here in the United States, and I think in Europe, as per usual, Europe is a leader in many ways, is for a comprehensive data privacy law to strengthen the protections that people have over what is being collected about them and being created about them when all of us use the internet, whether it's social media or visit any other website. Again, it shouldn't be fully your responsibility to track all of those things, but we ought to be able to opt out of data being used in ways that we didn't consent to, and in ways that fuel the cycle of hate that has been mentioned.
Is there any other questions? Okay, I don't see any other questions. Thank you for participating in our program, and Rule 5 will be closed today, but we also have other ongoing presentations in other room, so feel free to join. Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thanks, Stevie. Thanks, Sarah.